Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. It's Monday the 6th of August and my name is Brian Liddy. Apologies for the late start of tonight's show. And today is day 895 of the war in Ukraine. Ukrainians have reacted angrily to calls by freed Russian political prisoners to ease sanctions that affect ordinary Russians and for the two sides to enter negotiations. Vladimir Kara-Murza, who was serving 25 years in prison, had asked the West to consider whether sanctions hitting ordinary Russians were unfair and counterproductive. Ukrainian lawmaker Irina Gerashenko was among those who responded, saying, I no longer believe in any good Russians after a wave of criticism. After a wave of criticism, Kara-Murza told the BBC he accepted that Russian society shared responsibility for what the Putin regime is doing. Putin can't be allowed to win this war. Ukraine must win. There should be more support from Western countries so that happens. Ilya Yashin, released from an 8.5-year sentence over condemning Russian forces' massacre at the Ukrainian town of Bucha, also triggered uproar with calls for Ukraine to sit down at the negotiating table. After the backlash, Yashin the next day reiterated his opposition to Russia's criminal, barbaric invasion of Ukraine. I gave 2 years of my life for telling the truth about the war in Ukraine, he said, telling Ukrainians, I am not your enemy. Ukrainian analysts said they feared the high-profile Russian dissidents had the ability to influence Western policy, creating tensions with Kyiv's position. Russian missiles and drones targeted Kyiv and surroundings on Monday evening, with air defences activated in response, officials said. Kyiv has reported several intense air attacks over the recent weeks, including a Russian missile attack that destroyed part of the children's hospital in July. Last Wednesday, Russia fired at least 89 drones at Ukraine, more than 40 of which were shot down over the capital Kyiv and surrounding area in one of the largest aerial barrages in months. Russian troops have made tactical gains in the area of Toretsk, according to the Institute for the Study of War. The Donetsk former mining city is a priority for Putin's efforts to take control of the entire region. Russians were advancing in nearby Druzhba and Pivishny, both to the east of Toretsk, said the ISW. There were other reported Russian advances farther west around Pokrovsk. The Ukrainian General Staff reported continued fighting in the areas mentioned. Ukraine has criticised Mali's move to break off diplomatic relations over alleged Ukrainian support to rebels who had killed scores of soldiers of the military dictatorship and the Wagner mercenaries fighting alongside them. Ukraine's foreign ministry said the decision was short-sighted and hasty. 2 people were wounded by Russian shelling in Tomia-Balka, Kherson region on Monday, Ukrainian officials said. Across the border in Russia, 1 person was killed and another 3 were injured in a drone strike on the village of Vizevo, said the local governor. And now the latest from the conflict in Israel and Gaza. At least 39,653 Palestinians have been killed and 91,535 have been wounded in Gaza since the 7th of October, the Gaza Health Ministry said in a statement today. UN peacekeepers on the Israeli-Lebanese border have never been more crucial, the force's global chief Jean-Pierre Lacroix said today, as fears soared of an escalation in the Middle East. Israeli forces backed by drone strikes killed at least 12 people in the occupied West Bank, medics said today, after raids around 2 flashpoint cities in the north led to gun battles with Palestinians. The Israeli military said it conducted 2 separate airstrikes in the volatile city of Jenin, claiming to have hit armed militant cells, but gave no details. Israeli forces killed 45 Palestinian fighters in Gaza over the past day, the military said today, after heavy fighting in which Hamas said it destroyed two armoured personnel carriers during an ambush near the city of Rafah. The Israeli military said the Hamas official in charge of smuggling operations was among those killed. Air France today said that its flights. Air France today said flights of that. Forgive me. I'm going to move on to the next item if that's okay. At least 5 US personnel have been injured in an attack against a military base in Iraq on Monday, US officials have told US media, as the Middle East braces for a possible new wave of attacks by Iran and its allies following last week's killing of senior members of militant groups Hamas and Hezbollah by Israel. Today, a United Nations expert has condemned Israel's killing last week of Al Jazeera journalist Ismail Al-Ghul and cameraman Rami El-Rifi in Gaza and urged that the deaths be prosecuted as a war crime. The two men died in a 31st of July airstrike by the Israeli military, which said Al-Ghul was a Hamas operative who took part in the October attack against Israel. Lebanon is working to ensure any response to the Israeli killing of a top Hezbollah commander in Beirut does not trigger total war in the Middle East, its Foreign Minister Abdallah Abu Habib said today. South Korea's foreign ministry strongly advised its nationals in Lebanon and Israel to leave as soon as possible because of escalating tensions in the Middle East. A travel advisory was issued today. Meta Platforms apologised on Tuesday for erroneously removing Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's social media posts in which he expressed condolences to a Hamas official about the assassination of the group leader Ismail Haniyeh. The Gaza Strip must be transferred to the control of legitimate Palestinian authorities, and Israeli plans for temporary control of the enclave are unacceptable, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas told Russia's RIA news agency in remarks published today. The EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, has said the Middle East is on the brink of a war of unknown proportions in a post on X. UK civil servants are reported to have suspended the processing of arms export licences for sales to Israel pending the completion of a wider government review into the issue. Exporters seeking arms sales licences are apparently receiving messages from the Department of Business and Trade saying that applications are suspended pending the review. Whitehall insists this did not represent a change in policy and might be administrative procedures. No fixed date has been set for the completion of the review of the risk of the weapons sales to Israel in light of allegations of breaches of humanitarian law in the Gaza conflict. The task has been made more complex due to a desire by ministers to draw a distinction between arms that are sold to Israel for defensive purposes and those sold for offensive purposes for use in Gaza. The previous government announced in June that 108 arms export licences had been granted for Israel between the Hamas attack on the 7th of October and the end of May 2024. The value of the licences has not been revealed. After a Freedom of Information request, Christian Aid revealed 20 companies had been issued with standard individual export licences issued for military goods to Israel between the 7th of October and the 31st of May. A further 30 named companies had military export licence applications pending. The department told Christian Aid that granting a licence did not mean that an export has taken place. Some licences might expire unused and others might expire after partial use. Sir Keir Starmer is chairing another meeting this evening on continued action to tackle the violent disorder in connection with rioting. Police are monitoring reports of at least 30 Police are monitoring reports of at least 30 possible events in England on Wednesday. More than 400 people have been arrested in connection with rioting over the last week. There have been around 100 charges in the wake of the spread of violent unrest, according to the Director of Public Prosecutions, Stephen Parkinson. Parkinson also said that he is willing to consider charging some rioters with terrorism offences. The UK government has introduced more than 500 additional prison places in England in response to the far-right riots. The Justice Minister Heidi Alexander has said, warning that those causing disorder will have a prison place waiting for them. Courts in England could possibly sit through the night to swiftly see rioters in the dock, Alexander added. Police chiefs in England have announced an extra 2,200 riot-trained officers will be deployed to combat the extremist right-wing led violence that has erupted since last week. Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth has congratulated students across Scotland as they receive their Scottish Qualification Authority or SQA exam results. The 145,000 students, the highest since 2015, have achieved a wide range of qualifications including National 5, Highers, Advanced Highers and SQA awards. With this year marking the return of full coursework, assessment following the disruption during the pandemic, the data published by the SQA shows the pass rates for advanced Highers are 75.3%, Highers are 74.9%, and there's 77.2% at National 5 level. A record 90,045 vocational and technical qualifications have been awarded this year. That's an increase of almost 25% on 2024, reflecting the wide range of opportunities available to students. The data also shows the poverty-related attainment gap at National 5 and Highers has returned to levels broadly similar to 2019, the last year of pre-pandemic results. Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth said, "Congratulations to all Scotland's young people receiving their results for this year. Their resilience is remarkable and their achievements all the more impressive given the significant disruption to learning due to the pandemic at the end of primary school and start of secondary school journey. Today is a chance to celebrate the full breadth of achievement attained by Scotland's young people. I also want to give my thanks to the teachers, lecturers and staff in our schools and colleges and, importantly, Scotland's parents and carers for supporting each individual young person." Gilruth went on to say, "Among those achievements, I'm really heartened to see a record high of 90,045 vocational or technical qualifications have been awarded this year, up almost a quarter on 2023's results." The Resolution Foundation has warned that the two-child benefit cap is contributing to a widening gulf in regional poverty, leaving almost half of all children in some towns and cities living below the breadline. With Sir Keir Starmer and his new Labour government under pressure to drop the policy, research from the Resolution Foundation has shown a very strong relationship between local levels of child poverty and the share of families affected by the measures introduced by the previous Conservative government. The think tank said failure to tackle entrenchment regional inequalities The think tank said failure to tackle entrenched regional inequalities over the past 3 decades had been compounded by the policy, leaving almost half of all children living in Birmingham, Tower Hamlets in London, Manchester, Sandwell, Stockwell-on-Trent, Oldham, Wolverhampton and Walsall to grow up in families in poverty. Starmer faced a revolt from 7 new Labour MPs who voted for an SNP King's Speech amendment calling for the two-child cap to be abolished. Despite criticising the two-child cap during the election, not one of the new Scottish Labour MPs voted for the SNP amendment. Experts have said that the two-child policy is the UK's biggest single driver of child poverty, affecting about 1.6 million children by restricting child tax credit and universal credit in most households to the first 2 children. Abolishing it would cost the government between £2.5 billion and £3.6 billion a year. However, poverty experts say that these costs would be offset by savings in health and other services. Eluned Morgan, the former health minister, was sworn in on Tuesday, becoming the third leader of Welsh Labour this year. She has taken over after her predecessor, Von Gething, lasted less than 140 days in office before being forced to resign over a row about donations and a sacked minister he wrongly accused of leaking messages. Morgan, who is the first female Welsh leader and was the only candidate to replace Gething, said she was acutely aware that she had not been through a leadership campaign and needed to set out her stall to the nation and understand how the government could reset. Morgan said she would undertake a tour over the rest of the summer to understand the key priorities for people in Wales. First Minister John Swinney has passed on his best wishes to Eluned Morgan on her appointment. And he said, Eluned's appointment as the first female First Minister of the Welsh Government is a historic moment for Wales. I have no doubt she will lead her government with passion and determination, steadfastly standing up for the people of Wales. I look forward to working together with her on common challenges and building on the strong relationship between Scotland and Wales. Kamala Harris, the de facto Democratic nominee for US President, has named Tim Valls, the governor of Minnesota, as her running mate ahead of the November election. The decision ends intense speculation over which candidate Harris would pick to go up against Donald Trump, the Republican nominee and former president, and his choice for vice president, the Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Valls first ran for office in 2006 in a Republican-leaning congressional district, upsetting the incumbent. He kept the seat until he won the Minnesota governorship in 2018, then again in 2022. Under his leadership, the state has seen significant progressive legislation wins in recent years, including universal school meals, legalized marijuana, abortion protections, and gun control measures. Before he entered public school, he was a school teacher in Mankato, Minnesota, teaching geography to high school students. He also served in the Armed National Guard for 24 years. In an Instagram post announcing the pick, Harris said, "One of the things that stood out to me about Tim is how his convictions on fighting for middle-class families run deep. It's personal." Harris cited his upbringing in Nebraska and how after his father's death to cancer, his family relied on Social Security survivor benefits to make ends meet. He used the GI Bill to attend college. He coached high school football and advised the high school's Gay-Straight Alliance. His background is impressive in its own right, but also informs his governing, she said. Minnesota Democrats' legislative record informed her choice. She noted a law that constitutionally protects access to abortion and one requiring universal background checks for gun purchases. Valls went viral with a simple retort against Trump and his allies that caught National Democrats' attention, calling them weird in TV shows and on social media clips, pushing back on Republicans' weird behaviour while showing a list of what he had accomplished as a Democratic governor and how Democrats would govern if they win the White House. Harris and Valls are expected a rapturous welcome at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago starting on the 19th of August. She has been endorsed by former Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. Despite EU leaders calling out Viktor Orban's unsanctioned foreign policy PR stunts, the far-right Hungarian leader has intensified his campaign against independent media at home, increasing pressure on news outlets and civil society groups that do not toe the government line. The Prime Minister's meetings in recent weeks with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, China's leader Xi Jinping, and US presidential candidate Donald Trump have been highly controversial in diplomatic circles, further isolating Budapest at a time when Hungary is formally holding the Council of the European Union's rotating presidency. Getting less attention internationally has been active inside Hungary's targeting independent journalism and watchdog groups. At the centre of the crackdown is the country's controversial new Sovereignty Protection Office. led by a figure with close links to the ruling Fidesz party and granted the power to draw upon the intelligence services without judicial oversight. The office was set up by Orban's government formally to monitor foreign influence. Critics maintain that it is not an independent state body, but a tool to apply pressure on government critics. While the motives of the office remain unclear, many say that there are signs that Hungary's government, which has been centralising power since Orban returned to office 14 years ago, is attempting to further limit the space for independent groups. So far, the Sovereignty Protection Office has said it is looking into two entities, Transparency International Hungary and Atlazzo, an investigative outlet known for its work unveiling alleged government corruption. In public reports, the office has also taken aim at a host of high-profile media outlets, saying their journalism is harming Hungary's national interest. It does not investigate the fact that the public media is full of Russian propaganda, according to Marton Karpati, the president of the board of Telex, one of Hungary's leading independent news outlets, which was repeatedly mentioned in the Sovereignty Protection Office's July disinformation report on narratives surrounding the war in Ukraine. In the report, news stories quoting figures such as the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, the Czech President Petr Pavel, and the US Ambassador in Hungary, David Pressman, were categorised as Western disinformation narratives. Among the report's targets are some of Hungary's best respected foreign policy experts who have spoken about the government's close relationship with the Kremlin. In February, the European Commission announced it was taking the first step in local action against Hungary over the law that created the Sovereignty Office. The US State Department has also criticised the office. A record number of Scottish students have secured places at a Scottish university this year, UCAS figures show. Acceptances to Scottish institutions for home students increased by 7% to a new high of 31,220, according to the latest UCAS statistics. There has also been a 12% increase in acceptances from the 20% most deprived areas in Scotland, that's the SIMD, to all universities, up 540 on last year to a record 5,080. Overall acceptances to Scottish providers is 35,930. This is an increase of 1,910, that's up 6% since last year. Ministers for Higher and Further Education, Graham Day, said, "It is hugely encouraging to see a record number of Scottish students from our most disadvantaged communities getting into university. This demonstrates the strong progress being made on widening access to higher education and ensuring every young person in Scotland has an equal chance of success, no matter their background or circumstance." We have also seen overall acceptances for Scottish students reach a new record high. These figures show the great strength and resilience of Scotland's education system. He went on to say, "Our resolute commitment to free tuition and our enhanced student support offering ensures that access to university remains based on the ability to learn and not the ability to pay, ensuring that the opportunity of a university education is available to everyone, regardless of their background." Believe in Scotland have announced that they are organising a rally for independence at Holyrood on Wednesday the 18th of September 2024 to mark the 10th anniversary of IndyRef 1. They say they want to mark the date and reset the independence movement, reboot the campaign with the grassroots movement at the forefront. Believe in Scotland say they want to mark the date to deny the unionist media a field day. They predict that what they call the Westminster-centric media machine will mark the date and warn that if the independence movement doesn't rally on that day, then unionists will control the narrative and point to the general election to tell Scotland that the independence movement is down and out. The 10-year anniversary of Indy F1 will generate media attention and comment, and Believe in Scotland say they want to make sure the independence movement's voice is heard. So join us and help us put on an event that cannot be ignored. They have called on independence supporters to send a loud and clear message that they will not stop but will campaign till they win, because independence is normal. Believe in Scotland are considering holding other similar events across Scotland for people who can't travel to Edinburgh midweek on the 18th. Well, that's it for this evening, but before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please do consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. Right now, we urgently need to increase our donation if we are to be able to pay our bills. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but our income is just over £2,000 a month, and we are now facing mounting debts. Please donate whatever you can afford. But thank you for watching, and good night.